So, okay, today is March 15th, 2021, and we are going to discuss the Haggadah Shel Pesach, and also uh, if some halachic questions will come up, we'll answer them. We'll discuss the particular details of Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat on Wednesday. So I'm going to share the screen with the Haggadah, and we'll go in order. So we have this. According to some traditions, you chant the simanim of the seder before you start. Not everybody does that. I know in my tradition, the Iraqis, which we sing it, it's the same tune of that we use for tikkun atal, for when we mention a special prayer for switching from asking for dew to asking for rain and vice versa. So it's chanted like this: Kadesh. ורחץ הכרפס יחץ, מגיד רוחצה מוציא מצה, מרור כורך שולחן עורך, צפון ברך הלל נרצה. So, as you've noted, there are rhymes here. There are in rhymes Kadesh Uhatz, Karpas Yahatz. Then Magid Rochza Motzi Matza, which also rhymes with the last word Nirza, and also Maror Karech Shulchan Orech Tzafun Barech. So there are several sets of rhymes in this. It's supposed to be chanted really as a song. Some have different simanim. The reason that we have simanim for the seder, because before people had Haggadot, that's how they remember what is the next step. What do I do now? Okay, Kadesh Rohatz Kapas Yahatz. Now everything is detailed in the Haggadah. It's like an encyclopedia with instructions. And I think the more instructions you have, the more nervous people get. Like, what if I forget something? What if I don't do? What if I don't do something right? So, to reassure everyone, I'll remind you the last paragraph that we say before we eat the matzah, in the name of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel used to say, if you didn't say those three things on Pesach, you did not fulfill your obligation. What are those three things? Pesach, matzah, umaro. You have to say three words: Pesach, matzah, umaro. Now, if we take his statement and we reverse it, we'll find out that if you did say those three things, you have fulfilled your obligation, right? Because Rabban Gamliel comes to tell us, if you said the whole Haggadah and you left out those three words, you did not fulfill your obligation, because those are the words that are the core of the Haggadah. So there can't be anything else that's missing, only those three words. He didn't left out another word that you have to say, meaning that if you only said Pesach, Matzah, Maror, you fulfilled your obligation. So not to worry. Let's say you skipped one part of the Haggadah, you didn't put the matzot in the right order, you didn't drink the cup of wine, it doesn't matter. If you said Pesach, Matzah, Maror, you're good. So I was planning to print a book called The Shortest Haggadah Ever, and to write Pesach, Matzah, Maror. The problem is that I couldn't bind one sheet of paper. How do you bind it? So it's maybe on a card. Maybe I should put it on a card. It'd be nice.
I can make really tiny books,
Yeah,
one word on each page.
like the match boxes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I actually, I don't know if when I did it, I was of the Arba'a Banim, if I was the Hacham, the Rasha, or the Tam. I'm definitely not the one who can't ask, but my mom got really upset with me. She called me playing with matches. I probably was like 7, 8 years old. And she bought a notebook, and she said, you have to fill that notebook with the sentence, I will not play with matches anymore. So the first page I wrote, like 12 or 13 lines. And then I just put on each page one big letter. It's like, lo asahek, And I told my mother, you said to fill the notebook with the words. And I did. I filled it. And she accepted it. Okay, so it's good. We had like a Talmudic discussion on how to fulfill the punishment. And anyway, if you really prepare like business card size Haggadah, right, On the front it says the shortest Haggadah ever. On the back it says Petzah Matzah Umaror. You're good to go. But obviously we say more than that. So what happens with each one of the Simanim Kadesh is the Kiddush. Now, the Kiddush, most people think that Kiddush means saying a bracha over a cup of wine, but it's not. The Kiddush is the statement, Baruch Ata Hashem, Mekadesh Azemanim, or Mekadesh HaShabbat, you who have sanctified the Shabbat, or sanctified the holidays. But even that translation is inaccurate. The correct translation would be distinct. You have distinguished the day of Shabbat from the other days. That's the meaning of the word kadosh. Kadosh is to be distinguished. As a result of being distinguished and separated, something can become kadosh, holy, in the way that we use the word today. But the original sense of the word is to be separated. And that in itself is a beautiful concept of being able to separate and set aside a day of Shabbat for rest, of Pesach for reflection, and for telling our story and all that. So this year Pesach falls on Motzei Shabbat, so we don't start with this. We start with the Kiddush. There's an acronym for that, because the rabbis were arguing what is the right way to do the Kiddush if Pesach falls on Motzei Shabbat. They had a five-way mahloket, 5 different opinions. Eventually, the one who said Yoknehaz is an acronym for Yain, Kiddush, Ner, Avdalah, Zman. So first the Yain, Borei Pri HaGefen, then the Kiddush, the bracha that concludes with you, Baruch Ata Hashem, who have sanctified Israel v'Azemanim. And note here that on Shabbat we say Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Shabbat. You've sanctified the Shabbat. Or sometimes when we say the phrase, we say Mekadesh Shabbat v'Israel. You have sanctified the Shabbat and Am Israel. But when we speak of the holidays, we say Mekadesh Israel v'Azemanim, Israel and the holidays. First, so on Shabbat, first we mention the day, then the nation. And on the holidays, we reverse it. First we mention the nation of Israel and then the holidays. The reason for that is, that's how it's explained in the Gemara, that Shabbat is always sanctified or distinguished. It's a natural phenomenon. Every 7th day is Shabbat. It does not depend on us. So the 7th day Shabbat is distinguished, and so is the nation of Israel. But the holidays in ancient times were determined by the Bedin. The Bedin would receive the witnesses who saw the new moon and would decide that it's now Rosh Chodesh and holiday, and therefore we say Mekadesh Israel, you have distinguished Am Israel and you gave them the power to determine the holidays. And this year, because it's a Motzei Shabbat, we add Borei Meorei Ha'esh, and that's Ner, Yaknehaz, Yud Kuf Nun, Nun is for Ner, the candle. Then Havdalah. Again, we speak about distinction, but it's a different kind of distinction. It's the one, there's distinction that welcomes in the holiday and distinction that lets out the Shabbat. And finally, we say Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. We give Hashem thanks that we got to this point and we could celebrate together, which I think in this year would be pretty significant to a lot of people, or at least more significant than in previous years. And then it says here, Shoterov kos hayayin behasiba. The reason that we drink the wine inclined is that, and actually that applies not only to the wine but to many of the customs of the Seder night. And I think it's an important message to share, is that those were the customs or the table manners of the ancient Greeks and Romans during the time of the destruction of the temple. So, and I think that the message that at least this is what I share with my children, with the family, is that even though those customs are irrelevant to us today. Nobody eats reclined. I mean, I don't eat reclined. I do like symbolic, a little bit, tilting. One of my kids, would put two chairs next to each other and put pillows on them and try to really lie down, and it's always very messy. Something spills or something is knocked over, or we choke because we're not used to eat like that. Um, and as I tried to say, what do we have here? What is really amazing to me? The Mishnah, actually the Tosefta in Brachot speaks about how people used to, and I think we did a class on this last year. The Tosefta describes the banquet manners of the Greek nobility, Greek and Roman nobility. You come into the anteroom, like the waiting hall, and there people are being served appetizers, and they dip them with one hand. They only wash one hand because you don't need to wash two hands. And they chat and talk and they pass time together. And while they do that, the chef or the cook has time to assess how many guests are there, and then it can decide how much food to prepare because there's no refrigeration, right? And if he needs to kill animals, how many animals to kill, and to prepare the meal. And when it's ready, they go to the dining room where they recline on couches. The Tosefta actually says specifically that when they are in the waiting room or the waiting hall, יושבים על גבי כיסאות ועל גבי קתדראות. They sit on chairs and on cathedrals. The word cathedra is just an ornamental chair. I mean, Menachem is with us. We'll send by chat. I think that's the meaning of the word cathedra in Greek. But then when they go to the dining room, they lie down on beds, on recliners, and eat. So there are two stages for the meal. But regular Jews at the time of the temple didn't eat like that. Definitely not after the destruction of the temple. Even the arba kosot, the 4 cups of wine that we have, also come from those table manners, because for an important banquet you would have at least 3 cups of wine. One was the appetizer, one would be the wine that comes with the main course, and one the aperitif. So for Leila Seder, you drink the 3 cups and you add a 4th one for Kiddush. Now, and we speak about that we have to feel like Bnei Melachim. And that's why I said it's a little difficult to, if we just come with this notion and we tell our children, you have to feel like a king today. And so my son said, if I'm a king, I don't want to have wine and I don't want to recline. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to do this, right? If I'm a king, let me have Pop-Tarts. This is what I want. Whatever, like what I want. They're not saying that. I'm just saying, give you an example. So what happens here? This is the amazing thing. After the destruction of the temple, the celebration of Pesach became empty. Really, the whole concept of the holiday was emptied out of. There's no content because the whole thing revolved around the korban, the sacrifice. So that was no longer available. People got ready weeks in advance and would travel to the temple and would find their place, prepare the fire pit, roast the lamb, sing together. It was Woodstock, but in the kosher Woodstock. People were, tens of thousands of people singing together on the hilltops, the Hallel. It was unbelievable. And it was also, like I said last week, you remember that we discussed that on Thursday, that was the ultimate learning experience. It was a multi-sensorial learning experience. All your senses are involved. It was really something amazing. And then all of a sudden, on top of the trauma of losing the temple and the destruction and the war and expulsion and people being sold as slaves, when they recovered from that, because they started recovering, you say, okay, what do I do now for Pesach? Where do I go? So some people attempted to go back to the Temple Mount. So Massimo confirm what I said. Cathedra means seat. Thank you. So what do you do now? Some people attempted to go to the Temple Mount and do their lamb there. The Samaritans, the Shomronim, continue doing it until today in Israel. Some people said, okay, we don't have the Paschal lamb today, so we could eat matzah starting at noon. We don't have to wait till nightfall. Let's just start from the morning. Why wait? We could eat matzah now. The rabbis were in between. They're trying to fill this vacuum with something new. So they said, we're going to create that Seder night, that recital of the Hallel and the story of Yitzhak Mitzrayim. But they also said they were thinking of how the people feel, and they said, we want to give them a sense of hope, a sense of importance. Instead of feeling downtrodden and destroyed and expelled, we want to make them feel important. And because of that, we want them to eat this meal as a royalty. So we're trying to envision that, right? Really to draw that picture right in our mind's eye. That 2,000 years ago, when the Jews first started doing the Seder, meaning the post-destruction Seder, a lot of them lived in very, very poor dwellings. They had small houses, few belongings. Their family were dispersed. Not necessarily they knew where everybody was, or even if they survived. But yet, one day a year, they would get together and sit together. Where they pulled whatever they had, all the resources they had, they pulled together to feel that they are royalty. And that's why the Mishnah says, "Afilu anya mitparnes min hatamhui, lo yifhatu lo me'arba kosot." Even if there's this poor guy that relies on the soup kitchen, on Pesach, the community provides that person with 4 cups of wine, so he could feel like royalty. What did the rabbis do? I mean, this is really an amazing achievement. They rewrote the narrative for the Jews post-destruction. They told them, instead of looking at yourselves, considering yourselves refugees, miserable, hopeless, look at the life of the nobility around you and tell yourselves you could be like them. But not in terms of material possessions. Your royalty stems from your tradition and your knowledge. So now, I mean, just I tried to get into the mind of a Jew back then, working hard all year, and then one on Pesach Seder says, "I'm a king," right? My family is royalty. We tell the story of Yitzhak Mitzrayim. This is where we came from. We overcame all these difficulties, and we'll do it again. And that's why the story, the history of the Jewish people is what it is today. The rabbis really saved the Jewish identity with that move of Leila Seder and some other things that they did back in the day. But this is one of the most important of them. So today, when we sit around the table, right, the Seder table, and yes, we don't really recline, and I don't like drinking wine, and we don't dip. We dip more than once regularly, so we don't wait for Leila Seder to dip. There are 7 layers dips, so maybe people dip 7 times, right? But what we should think about is that the nations that destroyed the temple, that brought us to our knees 2,000 years ago, are gone. Yeah, their descendants exist, but they don't continue their tradition, their culture, and we are still around. And in a sense, Am Yisrael today is royalty. Again, not because of the material possessions, but because of our cultural, ideological, intellectual possessions. In terms of what happens with the coronavirus, Israel is the first state to almost vaccinate all of its citizens, and the people are heading both Pfizer and Moderna are Jews. This comes from that pursuit of intellect in Am Yisrael and the reluctance to give up hope. This is an amazing thing, and I think that's the in Leila Seder, probably that's the most important element that we have to stress out. that continuity and that sense of hope. And to say, yeah, it is strange, right, that we are today preserving the practices of the Greek and Roman nobility who destroyed the temple. But we're doing it as a reflection. It's to say, look who they were and where they are now. Where they now. So, yeah, that's why we drink the wine reclining. Like I said, if you're not comfortable reclining, it's okay. Just do symbolic. It's the message is what's important. It's the same thing. Washing hands and not saying birkat netilat yadayim. We don't say the bracha because back in the day, people used to wash just one hand, just to dip their vegetables in vinegar before they go to the main to eat the main course. The reason they dip the vegetables in vinegar is interesting. The Talmud says they did it in order to kill the worms that lived in those vegetables and that could turn into parasites in the digestive system. So I hope no one is eating now, but basically what it means is that they killed the vegetables, but the vegetables remain. They killed the worms, but the worms remain in the vegetables, and they ate them. They didn't have a problem with that. And it's funny because today, I'm sure you've seen it in every around every set of table. When you get up to wash hands, everybody screams, "Don't say the bracha! Don't say the bracha!" And then there's always one person, "Oh, I said the bracha." Nothing happened, It's not it's not the end of the world. People almost start crying when that happens. Just let it go. It basically says you don't have to say the bracha. If you said it, nothing happened. They meant you don't have to say it. Then you eat karpas. Karpas, there are interesting interpretation of why karpas, breaking the word into letters and explaining, has no mystical meaning. It's just celery, and they just dipped it because that was the common appetizer. The Sephardic Jews mostly use celery, which is karpas in Hebrew. Ashkenazi Jews use other vegetables, some parsley, some potatoes, right? And I think carrots also. Is carrot used for karpas? No? Anyway, if just have in mind that those who use potatoes, that's a recent minhag. It could not have been around before the New World has been discovered.
Gypsy has a minhag of carrots and parsley.
You're a rabbit, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. Parsley and carrot. But is he a Sephardic rabbit or an Ashkenazi rabbit? That's the question.
Well, if it's
parsley and carrot, is Ashkenazi. Okay.
I think he is Ashkenazi mate.
Ashkenazi, right? Okay. So there's an interesting debate around every halakha of the Seder, you will have a debate. It's just like it's inviting. You write a ceremony called Seder, right? And there are rules, so it's inevitable that people will ask, so what if, right? So the what if around the karpas or on the celery is, what if you ate so much karpas that you have to say the bracha hona, borei nefashot, right? So some people say it's so in order to avoid that problem, avoid that question that maybe I have to say borei nefashot and I don't know if the bracha hona of birkat hamazon, if it covers for that, just eat a little bit. So in many Haggadot you will find, you see, like it says here, tovlin karpas pachot mikezayit v'mei melach u'mvarchim. You take a little. So what's the point? You see how the whole point of the Seder is lost. We're trying to mimic the practices of the ancient Greeks, and then we go like, let me measure the karpas. This is it. Okay, dip it. No, it doesn't work that way, right? The ancient Greeks, if you ate appetizers, you had to eat, 2 or 3 stalks at least. So I think I mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. In my family, in the Iraqi tradition, there are no restrictions. When the karpas comes, there are mountains of vegetables, usually fresh cucumbers, like what is called in America Persian cucumbers. It's basically Israeli cucumbers. A lot of celery, and you dip it in lemon juice. We used to mix lemon and orange juice, and you eat as much as you want. this is also the time, and I recommend adopting this minhag. When you serve the celery, you also serve cold drinks, water, seltzer. Try to avoid sugars and high fructose corn syrup. And also, that's when we eat the egg. Some people eat the egg towards the end of the seder, after the matzah, korech, but that's not a good time to eat it. Can barely breathe, and then to stick another, boiled egg, it doesn't work. So if you eat it with the celery, with some vegetables, and drink a cup of water, you feel good. You could continue with the seder. And we would also give the children some rice, meatballs. Talking about rice, if you are Ashkenazi and you're not sure whether you can eat rice or not on Pesach, then Torah Vava offers an official Sephardic conversion course. Very easy. You just have to decide that you want to be Sephardic, and the reason that you could do that, is that to completely give up your minhag of not eating kitniot and eat kitniot this year, legumes, is that we live in a global community today. And our community now is a good example of that. We have people from all around the world, from different backgrounds, and we are one community. We know that some people do things differently, and it's okay. When the insistence on the minhag was very strong, it was when people lived in isolated communities. So when you move from one community to another and you do things that are different, it created problems. But now that we know, and definitely everybody knows, that Sfaradim eat rice on Pesach every year. This is the main theme of all the posts on Facebook and Instagram and I don't know what. Like all my Ashkenazi friends lament the fact that they can't eat kitniot, they can't eat rice on Pesach. So you know that the minhag exists. So adapt it. It's not a problem. Just do it. That's one. The other thing, just to if you do want to be strict and adhere to the minhag, I'd say adhere to the minhag as it was created originally, which is just refrain from flour that is made from certain types of legumes that can be confused with wheat flour. But it does not include peanuts or corn peanuts anyway. As I have learned recently, peanuts in general are not good for your body. So try to limit. Maybe that's the opinion of one scientist. I cut peanuts from my diet, and I feel good with that. I'm not anti-peanut. I'm just saying that we should do the research. Susie disagrees with me, but you don't know. Do the research and tell me what do you think of that? It's the one legume that is not cooked. It's fried or roasted for us to eat it. Yes, and Hama?
Yeah, peanuts are actually not a legume, I don't think. Or actually, I guess they count as a legume. They don't count as
they are legumes, yeah.
But they do have two health issues. One is that they mold within their shell, and then you eat mold, which can be bad for you. The other is that they're very high in omega-6, and we need more omega-3s in our diet. And so people who refrain for those two reasons, including me.
So I don't want to get into a debate between the peanut chassidim and the anti-peanut people. So it's fine. I just made this to put aside. Doesn't matter. But I say in general, the original kitniot decree, so to speak, was the fear of using flour of kitniot that looks like wheat flour. So if you don't have it, and you eat fresh beans or garden peas or anything like that, you have no problem at all. Israela, yes?
Yeah, regarding the conversion, we actually did that about 40 years ago. And it went like this. We had friends over for a Seder and everybody brought something. And somebody passed the salad to me and I looked and said, oh, there's peas. And my husband took his knife and he banged the table and he said, I hereby declare this a Sephardic Seder. Been that way ever since.
That's smart move. Kol hakavod. That's what we have to do. We cannot be bound by minhagim forever. I keep mentioning in that at one point in our past, someone deviated from the minhag of their forefathers, right? And just as they had the right to do it, we have. I mean, there are different opinions on that for sure. I'm just telling what is my opinion, and I think we don't have to suffer. So that also is an important, I think, important rule in halakha. Okay, so you can eat karpas, you get the celery, then yahats. It says you have to cut the middle matzah in two, and you keep the bigger part for the afikoman. So we will talk of the afikoman for a second, because this is also something that creates a lot of problem for people. Because the rabbi said, so what is afikoman in general? What is afikoman? How do you understand that afikoman? The Talmud doesn't know what it is, but then they sort of overlook it. One of the suggestions of the Talmud for afikoman is that it's dessert. And so now, and they read the statement, "En maftirin achar pesach afikoman," is that literally, what does it mean? En maftirin achar pesach afikoman. You don't say leaftir is leaftir besafa, to declare, or also to conclude. So you don't conclude your seudah on the night of Pesach with afikoman. This is how it was stated originally. The way it is read today is you don't eat anything after eating the afikoman. And I still have to find a commentator or halakha book that manages to work the halakha into the text. It doesn't fit, because the way they read it, it should have been en ochlin ahara afikoman. You don't eat after the afikoman. But the way it is written is you don't conclude after the Pesach afikoman. Now, because people understand it to be that the afikoman is the last thing you eat, and why is it the last thing you eat? They say because you want to savor the flavor of matzah. That's the last thing you should eat, right? Okay, so they said the afikoman concludes the seder. After the afikoman, you can't eat anything. Now, if the afikoman is matzah, and the matzah today is also symbolic of, sort of representative of the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach you couldn't eat Korban Pesach after midnight. So that means that you have to eat the afikoman before midnight, right? Has anyone been in a seder where there was like an emphasis of we must eat the afikoman before midnight? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's assume that midnight is at midnight at 12, even though sometimes with the clock change, probably 1, but let's say it's 12:30. Okay, so you have to finish the last piece of matzah, right, and eat nothing afterwards at 12. Okay, before you eat that matzah, you have to finish the Hallel. Not finish that, but read a long section of the Hallel, right, before Birkat Hamazon, and before that you have to have the meal. And before that, you have to have the Haggadah, right? And if you wait until Shabbat, like this year, until Shabbat is over, or like some people wait to what is called Laila Vadai, we have to make sure that it's not just sunset, but total darkness, so another 45 minutes. So you start your Seder night at 9 o'clock, and like happens in a lot of families, everyone wants to put his Devar Torah in, and it takes like 2-3 hours to say the Seder. You get to the meal at 11:30, and then you say, okay, guys, we have 20 minutes to eat the meal, and then say the rest of the Hallel, and then eat the matzah, and then it becomes like a crazy race. People eat very fast. They stuff their face with the afikoman. Sorry for the word, and then, okay, now we can talk more about it. It doesn't make sense. It this skit where they, like, two guys like from Lakewood or something, like we stayed until 1 a.m. Oh, we stayed till 2. We didn't finish till 3. And
הרב קפאת. הרב? אתה קפוא. You are muted now.
Yeah, we got disconnected for a second. That was obviously an act of the anti-logic police. Whenever I say something logical that contradicts the traditional view, that happens. I know they're listening to us. Could be because I took the COVID shot. Then they managed to put some kind of a tracking device in my blood, and I'm just kidding. Anyway, so here's the story of the afikoman. Afikoman is dessert, really, which the Gemara says. But at the time of the Talmud, when the Talmud was discussing it, the actual practice of afikoman was already forgotten. The only thing that they retained was that it had to do with dessert. But the eating of dessert after a banquet, the practice among the Greek nobility was that, or at least in Eretz Israel, is that you do dessert hopping, meaning you go to friends and you have dessert in their houses. Shai is asking me about mufleta. I don't know how to do mufleta. Go online and find the recipe. And I don't eat gluten either. I'm trying not to.
Rabbi, I think the view that you're sharing is actually one of the views in the Gemara.
Right.
But it's rejected.
Right. But maybe I don't think they say it directly. They're hinting it.
Well, you shouldn't switch your chabura.
Oh, right. They say different.
You shouldn't take your things and take them outside.
Right. That I know. Right. So they say this. They say about the Pesach itself. Right. What Joel says is right, but they don't say it in connection with the afikoman. They just say it separately. It says enochlin. You can't move during the Pesach from one house to another. You have to stick with your group, right? And that really makes sense of what the Rabbi said on Pesach. We all eat together as a nation, but that nation is made of granular units of each family. Whoever got together, we stayed together. So on every other night, if you have a banquet, it was very common. And for example, on Sukkot, it's very common for people to do that. You can't have everybody over for the meal, so you say, come over for desserts, for fruits, right? People do that. And they used to do it on after following banquets, or during festivities. And the Mishnah says, "En maftirin achar Pesach afikoman." On Pesach, it's different. When you finish the meal, you don't go for dessert in other houses. You could eat dessert, but eat it at home. So the prohibition was against leaving the house and going somewhere else, which, as I said, makes a lot of sense, because it says we want to keep the family together, or the whole group together on El Seder. So if that is the case, that means that after you finish, you don't have to rush to eat the afikoman. The afikoman is not really the matzah. We call it that, but this is not really the afikoman. You finish the last piece of matzah, you said birkat hamazon, and then you could have dessert if you want. I mean, when I was a kid, my grandfather's house, this is what we did. We had the kosher for Pesach cake and some fruits, and we would go on another hour or two, whatever, until we fall asleep. But just there's another part of El Seder where we have to really do it with common sense. So, okay. Any question about the afikoman? Oh, yeah, different minhagim. Some people have the minhag that the children steal the afikoman, right? You do that. We have I think it's a little strange, but I respect the minhag. I think it's a little strange that we sort of like tell the kids go ahead and hide the afikoman, like steal it, right? But no, they know it's a game, so I think it's fine. I mean, I used to be more critical of it, and now I think it's just fun for the kids. We do the opposite. In the Iraqi community, we actually give the afikoman to the kids, and we tell them, you go and hide it, and we'll have to find it. It's the exact opposite of what people know about the afikoman. But we don't just give them the afikoman. There was the part of the seder that was most highly anticipated by the kids. The afikoman is wrapped in a scarf, and the scarf is tied like a sash diagonally on the children's chest, and then they leave the room, and then they come back with pillows on their back, and the adults, I mean, and we would stand, from the youngest to the oldest, all the kids in line coming in, with our backs bent, with those bags. And the idea of tying the afikoman here is because the Torah says that Bnei Israel left Egypt, mish'arotam tzerurot besimlotam al shichmam. The dough was tied to their body. This is how, maybe this is how they warmed the dough so it would rise a little bit. And the bags symbolize their possessions that they took out of Egypt. And so then we would come into the room and the adults would say, Me'efo batem? Where did you come from? Mimitzrayim. La'n atem holchim? Where are you going to? Li'Yerushalayim. V'ma yesh lachem basak? What do you have in your bags? And then you would start singing Ma Nishtana. So that was very exciting because we were acting out the Seder. In the Syrian community in Brooklyn, this has been written into the Sidurim, but they kept the Arabic. And I just spoke with a friend of mine. Who was it? One of my friends here in Potomac, who actually speaks Arabic. I mean, the community in Brooklyn does it. They don't speak Arabic anymore. Their parents left Syria in the 1910, 1920, almost 100 years ago. They know some words in Arabic, but still they insist on Leila Seder to say, when the kids come into the room, Ashza wadatak, and like what's in your bag? It says, Min wen jayeh lawen rayeh. Where are you coming from? Where are you going to? And my friend who came from Damascus when he was 10 years old and speaks Arabic, he says, I told my parents, that's it. I don't want to say it in Arabic. My kids don't understand it. You have to say it in English or in Hebrew. We still say parts of the Seder in Arabic in my family, but it's just like we say it both in Hebrew and in Arabic just because we like the way it sounds. So, but that was really the highlight of the Seder when the kids come in and they, and I want to mention this anecdote that I heard from Rabbi Haim Angel. He used to be the rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in Manhattan. He in a class that he gave on Leila Seder, maybe it wasn't about that. Maybe it was about the Sephardic tradition. When I was visiting, maybe that, yeah, because it wasn't a Shabbaton about the Sephardic tradition. I was in the shul. So he said that when he was in YU, one of his professors was giving a class on Pesach costumes, and he said that the Pesach the Seder is intended to reenact Yetziat Mitzrayim, and he said it's a shame that no one does anything today to actually act out Yetziat Mitzrayim, to play it out, dramatically. So Rabbi Angel didn't want to interrupt the professor while he was talking, so he went to him after the class to tell him that actually the Sephardic communities do it. He thought that the professor didn't know, but when he told the professor, that some Sephardic communities do act out the Exodus, the professor said, yeah, I know, and dismissed him. In other words, I mean, this was about 35 years ago, right? So what it means is that for the professor, the Sephardic minhag didn't count. When he said it's a shame that no one does it, he says no one that counts for me. Okay, things have changed since then. People are more aware of the different traditions, and in general, the idea of acting out Leila Seder has become more and more central. The kids are more involved. You go to any kosher store, you'll see finger puppets, usually for the plagues. The plagues are very popular. You'll see plastic frogs. We used to, at one point with our children, have them act out. You'll be Pharaoh and you'll be Moshe, and you come and talk to him and let my people go. It's an important part of the Seder. Of course, always, leave enough time to eat and to relax. That's also important. So now talking about the Ma Nishtana, I want to say one more thing and then open for questions before I have a class at 7, so I have to go. Mani shtana alayla hazeh, right? So the kids asked 3 questions, or 4 questions. Originally it was 3. The 3 questions corresponded to the Pesach matzah u'maror. The kids asked, why are we eating only roast and not boiled or broiled meat? Why do we eat only matzah? Why do we eat only maror? Those are the 3 questions. After the destructions, or outside of Eretz Israel, that has changed. So they added the question about reclining and seating, and took out the question about roast meat, because they wouldn't eat roast meat after the destruction, and added the question about dipping. Every other night we dip only. The question was, every other night we dip only once, and tonight we dip twice. But then when they read this in Babylonia, they said, we don't dip at all. What do you mean we dip only once? We don't have to dip. So they changed the question, and they read, every other night we don't dip even once, and tonight we dip twice. So it's all about where do you read the Haggadah? What is the local custom? But here's the curious thing that we really have to ask ourselves when the kids ask the Mani Shtana. We didn't do anything yet. We didn't eat, right? Nothing. We didn't do anything. The only thing we did, we dipped the celery in salt water. Yes. We didn't recline. We reclined for the wine, but we didn't have the rest of the meal. We don't know. Maybe we'll sit later on. We don't know. We dipped the celery. Are we going to dip again? We don't know. We didn't eat matzah yet, right? And we didn't eat the maror yet. And then the children come and they ask, why are we eating only maror? Why are we only reclining? Why are we dipping twice? Why do we eat only matzah? You don't know that that's what's going to happen. How do you know? Maybe I'm going to dip 3 times. Maybe I'm not going to dip again. And maybe I'm going to sit, and maybe I'm going to eat chametz. How do you know that? So we fail to ask that question because we are so programmed with that plan of, we tell the kids what to ask, and then we start explaining. But those questions correspond to ancient times, which for some may be better times, when first you would eat the Seder meal, and then you would ask the questions. And that would make a lot of sense. Because now you finished eating, and the kid looks back and says, wait, we dipped twice. We ate only maror, and we were reclining, and we ate only matzah. Why? Oh, let me tell you a story. And then you start telling the story of the Haggadah. So that was really the original way. Meaning that if you have guests over and they're really hungry, or they don't tell you that they're hungry, but they start fighting, the best way to calm their fighting is to serve food, hopefully good food, right? Then it's okay to do that. Serve the food and then say the Haggadah. But I'll conclude with that. My theory, why did it change? Why did it that we first ask the questions, say the Haggadah, and then eat the meal? What happened? And then the rabbis decided to reverse the order. I think that just humanity happened. That what happened was that most people just after eating the meal fell asleep. Nobody asked questions. Nobody said the Haggadah. So everybody says, you know what? First you have to pay. First, ask the questions. All in all, I'm saying we have to take it easy. Enjoy the Seder night and enjoy that moment. Bring in the historical context of where were we 2,000 years ago and where we are now, and where were we 3,500 years ago at the Exodus. I think it's an amazing experience. So we just touched the beginning of the Haggadah, but really I spoke about the general concepts. I think that's I hope that's good, and we will continue more, God willing, next Monday. Bezrat Hashem. Yes, Shaike. Ken.
אבן שאל משהו בצ'אט.
מה השאלה, אבן? What is the question?
Should we let the kids ask whatever they want to ask about Pesach instead?
That would be perfect. If you let the children ask, let's say if you skip the Mani Shtana and you go on and then your child asks, wait, you didn't say manishtana. Oh, it's good. The whole idea of that's another educational element of the seder, by the way. It's to introduce change. Change is good for your brain. It is healthy. It's actually recommended once in a while to do things differently. If you drive to work or go walk in a certain path, take a different path. Move your, I mean, we don't have it anymore, but your wastebasket from your right to your left. Try to work the mouse with your left hand. All these things that really that the Leila Seder revolves around the idea of introducing change and having the children ask questions. So yeah, I think sometimes we prepare the children so much for Leila Seder that we take away the element of surprise. So if you could do that, that would be amazing. Okay, yes, Nehama.
You can answer Monday because I know you need to go, but I do have a few questions for people who have dietary restrictions that I would like your opinion on. One is people who can't drink wine or grape juice because grape juice is chock full of sugar. The other is those who can't eat gluten, and then our substitutes are mostly rice, which are and tapioca, which supposedly don't count, and they're not healthy anyway. So substitute for the ceremony of matzah. Those are the two questions.
So,
I have a third one also. Since we're doing Seder on Zoom, two of my kids are on the mainland, so it's going to be really late for them if we start after sundown here. So how early can we start?
Yeah. So I'll answer very briefly, and on Wednesday we'll talk about the practical questions, but I'll say this. If you can't drink wine or grape juice, don't drink. If there's one person in the room who can drink, that person drinks and represents everyone, and that's how it used to be. Only one person drinks wine, not everyone. If even that is impossible, so no one drinks wine. Drink apple juice, drink water, it doesn't matter. It's symbolic. And you could stop and say, here, we would have drank a cup of wine if we could, but we are Alcoholic Anonymous, or we can't have sugar, whatever. It's not in the Torah. You don't have to suffer. Matzah, the same thing. People who suffer from celiac or sensitivity to gluten should not eat matzah. Oat matzah is good, but again, it's symbolic because it's not one of the 5 grains. It doesn't count as bread. We should say mezonot for oats because it doesn't behave like the other grains. It doesn't rise. I explained in my Pesach guide that I sent out that oats were not known in Eretz Israel when the Rabbi spoke of the 5 grains, and they behave differently. And regarding your last questions about the time difference between you and the kids, are they in the West Coast or the East Coast?
West Coast, so it's 3 hours.
3 hours difference. So the earliest that you could start the Seder is to start as early as you get to the Kiddush. You do the Kiddush with sundown. So Misheteh. So if you
Shabbat is the issue.
Yeah, you could. So you could start the Seder on Shabbat. There's no problem with that. You could start about 2 hours earlier. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we do Seder without matzah? So the matzah is symbolic. You don't eat it. You look at it and you say, yeah. I mean, if I'm trying to the statement in the Talmud is the ways of the Torah are pleasant. When the Talmud asks what is anaf etz avot, the thick bush that we use for the hadas, and they say maybe it's harduf, a certain type of tree that grows in Eretz Israel, and they say no, it cannot be harduf because it's thorny and it will hurt you, and the Torah is pleasant. So even though the Torah says you must eat korban pesach, you must eat matzah, but that is only for people who are capable of doing it, and if they cannot, they should not. Okay, but we'll talk more about these halachot on Wednesday, and if you have questions, line them up. We'll talk about that. I'll see you, Be'ezrat Hashem, at 7:45 for Arvit. להתראות בינתיים. All the best. Bye.
All the best. תודה רבה.
תודה רבה. Gracias a todos.